All right, Gigi, we're back again for another podcast here. I don't remember what we were talking about. We brought up radio. You said something about a mystery series or a detective series like the Nose or something. What was that?
Well, first of all, the Lone Ranger.
Right.
That was the big
That's classic.
one.
Yeah.
My dad, well, it was whatever Dad liked
Mm.
mostly. Wasn't anything else for us girls, but WGN in Chicago was an ag program.
And it's WGN's still around today.
Yeah, it is, but it's a lot different now than it was.
I bet it
then.
is.
Yeah, and then they have the ag reports, the markets, and all that kind of stuff. The Shadow Nose, which was a detective
That's
show.
such a weird name. The Shadow Nose.
And the music was pretty ooh.
Oh yeah.
So that was fun. And then, let's see, what else did we listen to? I don't remember a lot of the other shows that were on radio, but that was about it for radio for us. We didn't really spend that much time. We worked a lot. But those were the two that I remember the most.
The reason I brought this up and why I proposed this whole podcast idea to you is kids that are my age, late millennials, early Gen Z, basically kids grown up and born in the 90s, we see technological changes every month.
Yeah.
And it's so much to process for someone our age, and I think that has something to do with why my generation and the generation after me is perceived to be so spoiled. Whereas when you grew up, there wasn't a whole lot of what we know as technology. And really, technology, if we predate a lot of civilization, technology was arrowheads and the wheel. Whereas today, people think of technology...
The telegraph, don't forget the telegraph.
People think of technology as being something with silicon chips, microprocessors, computerized, stuff like that. But technology, I mean... Most technology, unfortunately, is driven by warfare. So when I think technology of the old world, I think of metallurgy and spears, daggers, war machines, and stuff like that. Whereas today, technology is anything with a computer. So your cell phone, cameras, everything's got a computer in it nowadays.
Well, just like the vocabulary today is just, I mean, for people my age, you just don't say, you know, or you don't understand, or you weren't taught all that vocabulary as to what that's all means.
Right. And even today, refrigerators have computers in them, which I think is preposterous. But
My God.
people watch television and check their emails on their fridges now.
Well, they lock the doors, they unlock the doors, you know, I mean, it's just...
Home security's built into everything. So
Yep.
it's, I mean, being in the information age and the age of technology, it's very strange. So I wanted to visit what you were growing up with, because I think it's an interesting comparison. I think it's fun to learn from that kind of stuff, and just the conversation. I enjoy the conversation itself. So,
Well, the telephone, I mean, that was a big thing. And we had a party line. I don't know if you call that technology, but I guess it was.
a party line?
A party line.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, it was in the country. I don't know I assume they had it in the towns, but out in the country, we had like 5 or 6 people on one line.
Really?
Yes, and when you...
Wow.
It was a gossip line.
So if you picked up the receiver and your neighbor was on the phone, you could hear him?
Yeah.
Oh, that's odd.
They did.
That's very odd. I didn't know that.
And if you started, each person had a ring. Our ring was 1 long and 2 short. So we had a crank on this phone on the wall. It was a huge battery in this phone. We have one here, right here on the...
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to be on the screen for the people to look at right now, is that phone.
I mean, the thing is so heavy. It's huge.
Well, it was a lead acid battery. I mean,
Probably.
It had to be heavy.
Yeah. But then when it rang our ring, we didn't hear other people's ring, but we heard our own ring.
Mm-hmm.
So we would answer, and then if somebody happened to be talking or listening, they could hear what we were saying.
Right. That's odd.
And then there was a phone office, and there was an operator. And you could ring in and get the operator, and then she could ring whoever you wanted on the party line.
Mm.
So it was.
That's very strange.
It was interesting.
That's very strange.
Well, it was communication. I mean, that's what we had.
So if I want to predate you a little bit, say 100 years, I think this is an interesting timeline I brought up, and it's just stuff you don't think about, and I think it's really interesting. This is timetoast.com, which is a very interesting name, but they have a timeline of household technology from the early 1800s through today.
Wow.
So the first thing that they have on here is the kitchen range. So the earliest idea of a wood stove that I know of came out of the 1600s, which is basically a stove that kind of has a range on top, and it's got a range on the side to keep stuff warm. Like, I know especially for cheese making, there were a lot of adaptations of the wood stove to have a very, very thick piece of steel that was only connected by about an inch of thickness to the wood stove, so it just kept their culture of bacteria warm as the whey separated from the curds.
Warming ovens later.
Mm-hmm. So the wood oven is one thing, but what I'm looking at, which the viewers will see here, it's more of like a field kitchen stove from the caravan days. So it's a much bigger stove, and it has handles for ovens where you could actually cook food in them, whereas a wood oven, the door opened and you threw wood in it. You couldn't necessarily bake in a wood oven. You'd have to use an earthen oven if you wanted to bake in them, which I'm sure you know what that is.
Yep.
So that's a completely different process. Earthen ovens are very hard to prep. Just having to start that fire, waiting for the oven to heat up, taking all those coals out, mopping the oven so you don't scorch whatever you put in there, getting it at the right temperature, and then putting your...
Oh my goodness.
Whereas a kitchen range actually has the wood in the back. You have an area where you can put things in like a traditional oven today, and then the whole top is like the wood stoves where you could put your kettles, your skillets, and stuff like that. So I thought it was pretty interesting. They dated it 1800, but I'm sure it was 1780 through 1820 that was a thing. The second thing that they have on here is 1831 electric power generation, which is kind of interesting, thinking of 1831 being electric power. And then 1850 is indoor plumbing, which is obviously huge. What did you grow up with in the country?
My grandfather built the house that we moved into. After he passed away, we moved in with my dad's mother, and they had one of the first indoor bathrooms.
And this was the 1930s?
Let's see, it was 1940.
1940?
Yeah.
Because a lot of rural America, that's the thing with these technological updates, especially in the 1800s, it took 30, 50 years for it to make it to the country. So the West was always 30, 50 years behind on technology.
Yeah.
Because the only way you could get there was railway, and
yeah.
not a lot moved by rail back then. I mean, we still moved cattle by walking them places.
Yeah,
you know.
You drove them. You herded them into a main area where the train was, and that's where they loaded them up and sent them out east.
So you're saying, though, your grandfather didn't grow up with indoor plumbing?
No, he wouldn't have.
And that would have been in the late 1800s.
Oh.
So just because it's a thing in 1850 definitely doesn't mean everybody's got it. Whereas today, the new iPhone launches, and everybody's got it in a week.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a completely different world.
Well, we had an indoor bathroom, and then we also had an outhouse for the hired men who worked for us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was there, and the men that came to work would use that, but...
So did you guys have like a guest house for them, or did they just stay in town?
No, they just came every morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because my dad had no family, so he had nobody to trade work with. I mean, he had no brothers.
And that's rough for a farm.
It was.
For a farm life, not having a family where you can have free labor, essentially.
Yeah, you feed them, and you clothe them, and you house them.
You give them a decent public education, and
Yeah.
they work for you.
Go out and make some money.
That's another thing that's very foreign to even me. I didn't do a whole lot on the farm. I built a couple 100 yards of fence We raised a bucket calf. I mean, I didn't do a whole lot of farming stuff, but my father and all of his brothers, your sons,
oh yeah,
that's all they did.
I did a lot of that.
And without 6 sons, you can't do near as much as you could with 1 son.
Oh my.
It's a little different.
Well, it just takes more to feed 6. That's the whole problem.
Kind of an interesting debt to reward ratio there.
Yeah.
So indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
That's a little interesting bit of history.
Well,
because you still have a dry sink in this house. I mean, it's right over there. You have a dry sink, and
that was just an antique that was given to my mom.
Yeah.
It was never used for anything except decorative. But yeah, we didn't. We always had running water from the spring, which is not a technological thing, but as we talked about before, she couldn't use an automatic washer because there wasn't enough water pressure.
Mm-hmm. And if she did, it'd probably take a 24-hour cycle to do what should
get
have
one
taken,
load of clothes a day.
which should have taken about an hour, hour and a half.
That didn't work very good because Dad always had work clothes and
because a lot of people that
girls.
did have indoor plumbing, they wouldn't get it from a spring. They would either have to gravity feed it from in town, or if they lived in the country, they had to build. I've seen a lot in old, man, where was that? There's a lot of old shacks that you'll just find out in nature where there are huge gallon tanks, like sheet metal gallon tanks on top of a hillside.
Tanks. Yeah.
Like on top of a hillside, or sometimes if it's like flat in the middle of the country, they built a tower.
I don't think I ever saw that. Yeah.
The hills and hollers especially. If you get down towards like in Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, they're everywhere.
Well, there was water closets before the automatic flush, where the water was stored in a box at the top.
Yep. And you had a big chain running down to the bottom.
Yep. We didn't have that. We were better off. We had the old claw foot tub and a sink and a stool. So.
Because
yeah.
Before that, I mean, for bathing, you'd have to go outside to the hand pump.
No.
And you would have to heat up your water, and then you'd fill your tub, and then Dad would get in, and then the eldest son would get in.
Oh my goodness.
And then the wife would get in, and by the time it made to the baby, that's where they get the phrase, "Don't throw the baby out with bathwater," because by the time the baby got in, it was dark. Whereas with indoor plumbing, you just
put him in the sink.
Yeah, you just drain the tub, and you can run more water.
Yeah.
Because I mean, those little things that we take for granted today, people don't understand what effort it took just to take a bath.
Oh my God.
I mean, even getting soap in the 1800s couldn't have been an easy effort.
My mom made her own soap for laundry.
Right, that's what I was going to bring up next.
I mean, you could buy soap, but she made lye soap
in
big old pans, and then it was lard and lye, and I don't know what else she put in it. But then when it hardened, she'd shave it and put it in the wash machine.
Because I remember we were talking about that not too long ago, and obviously today we're pampered with 8 different brands of whatever.
We're inundated with all that stuff. Oh my goodness.
And most of it's just industrial cleaners with a label on it. It's not even anything special.
Well, you put
chemicals.
Some
it's
perfume in it or some...
Yeah, it's chemicals with a perfume, whereas, like you're saying, I mean, most soaps back in the day, I mean, the first use of soap dated to Egypt, where they were sacrificing pigs upriver. People would wash their clothes downriver because the fat in the water helped clean the clothes. Yeah. You know, and that's just something people don't know today because we're just used to chemical products.
Well, and they didn't laundry clothes after one wearing.
Oh, yeah, they wore their clothes a whole month or
goodness.
more.
They didn't have deodorant either.
No.
No.
You mentioned the sink, which is always nice for washing your dishes and your hands and what have you, whereas back before that you had to have a dry sink. Talking about the toilet versus the water closet, what else would you use indoor plumbing for? Water heaters? Did you guys have a water heater?
We did. Yeah, we always had a water heater.
Was it gas or electric?
Electric.
Really?
Yeah, we had no gas of any kind.
Huh. Well, that makes
propane
sense.
Tank or anything.
That makes sense because that was kind of before LP got normalized.
Yeah, it
Because
was
nowadays
all,
everyone's got an LP tank that they get filled once or so a year.
yeah, there was no LP tank at all. Mm-mm. No, it was all electric.
And I can't
Everything.
imagine electricity was cheap back then.
Probably not much.
No. Whereas today it's just another utility people pay.
Oh my gosh.
But you didn't
Yeah.
use near as much electricity back then either.
Oh no, no, you did not.
What'd you guys do in the winter for heat?
We had a coal furnace.
Which was pretty
And
common.
it was called a stoker because it was small small pieces of coal in a, well, it was in a big container, and there was an auger at the bottom of it. And we filled the coal from a cellar window into this big tank, and then it burned. It augered in, and it would burn in the furnace part.
Mm-hmm.
But what we took out of there were called clinkers, and that was what was left after the heat burned through the coal.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, it looked like lava rock when you took it out. It was full of holes.
Well, there's a lot.
But you had to take that out ever so often to
There's
keep the coal burning.
one thing people don't know about coal is there's a lot of sediment in it.
Yeah.
So if you don't take that stuff out, it just insulates your furnace and makes it less effective.
Yeah, it's not, and then there was a blower on it. So, you know, we were able to control the heat to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't as warm upstairs. There was one register in the middle of the hall, and the 3 bedrooms branched off from that. And you'd jump out of bed and run and stand on the register.
You are bringing back memories from my childhood because we didn't really have central air. We had central heating, whereas today everything HVAC is controlled by the central air. We only had central heat. And you reminded me waking up, and I mean I was born in 1994, and
Yeah.
this is not old at all. But I had the same thing when I woke up. There's the register in the hallway, had a big flapper on it, and you made sure that was wide open, and
Yep.
you put your feet on it because that was always what was the coldest. Your feet were always cold. Waiting to shower in the morning before church or something.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that was the first thing we always did is get up,
Run to the register.
run to the register because you were cold. And of course, you'd sleep with 5-6 blankets at night,
Oh,
whereas
my
today you have one comforter because you got central air.
My grandmother had feather beds, and we loved it because it was so nice to just snuggle down in these feather beds.
Like down feathers.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was all down. Yeah.
Well, neighbor Bill, the funniest story I ever heard from him was having to sweep ash out of his bed because they would take coals from their fireplace.
Oh my God.
Because he grew up same time you did, only his family was a lot worse off. They had a lot more kids and not a whole lot of money. They would take I think it was a copper flip top that they would fill with coals from the fire, and then they would rub it at the base of the kid's bed so that they had heat at the bottom of the bed.
They didn't leave it in there.
No, but I mean, you're going to get ash anywhere you take that thing.
Yeah.
So he said like once a week they would sweep ash out of underneath the bed and out of the sheets.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what his
Yeah.
parents did to try and keep the kids warm,
The kids
because
warm.
I think he had 3 or 4 siblings. They all slept in the same bed. I mean, it was the 30s, so
Oh my
they all
God.
slept in the same bed. They said they had like the equivalent of a queen size bed for these 4 or 5 kids to sleep in.
Yeah.
They said that's how mom and dad would tuck us in at night. They would literally tuck them in,
Yeah.
and at the base of the bed, before they tucked the base of the sheets in and the blankets in, they would use
Hurry up
that,
and get in.
try and heat up the bottom of the bed so the kids stayed warm.
No, we were a little more fortunate that was just 2 of us. My sister and I slept in just a regular bed. It wasn't a king size or a queen size or anything, but
Mm.
it was interesting. Yeah, I don't think I'd trade it. You know, it was just so different from now. You just can't imagine uh, all the things that children have at their fingertips now.
Which is
And
pretty
they say
scary.
kids are smarter, but basically I think they've been exposed to things at an earlier age and more of it.
I don't think kids today are necessarily smarter. I think the intelligence quotient is going
No,
up.
I don't.
I think kids are still pretty dumb. Because the difference, smart and dumb versus intelligent and ignorant, those are two very different things, right? With
Right.
intelligence comes wisdom,
Maturity.
or not wisdom. With intelligence comes intellect. With being smart comes wisdom, right? Intelligence, the way I equate it, having intelligence is knowing a tomato is actually a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Those are two very different
That's a
schools
good
of thought.
comparison.
Because intelligence comes from schooling and exposure. Smarts come from application experience. Your experiences
Well,
speak for a
there's
lot
always
more
the
than what kids
genetics
are today.
of the abilities.
Well, I mean, you can talk genetics, eugenics, manipulation of chromosomes all you want.
Well, how many Einsteins are there?
Well, Einstein was also mentally retarded, so I don't know if you really want a world full of Einsteins. Because you can see with adopted children, they have very different genes than their host parents.
True.
But they end up having the same speech correlations, they have the same tics,
Environmental.
they have the same mental capacities as their parents.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have parents that have, like, look at my family, 4 very different children.
4 very different
So,
children. Yeah.
I think it's an environment thing, it's an exposure thing, it's a parenting thing, it's an experience thing. I don't think
Yeah.
you can take someone that has what we would consider poor genes and put in a family that is a healthy family environment that provides for them and gives them the initiative and the incentive and mental capacity to do well, and do the same thing with someone who has the best genetics and put them in the south end of Chicago, and they're going to end up like people in the south end of Chicago do, you know. So I don't think that there's too many variables to life, really. That's
true.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
We like to make things simple.
Well, we attach names
Labels.
to things that we don't even
truly understand.
shouldn't do.
Yeah. That's the problem is we'll never truly understand every single case, but it helps to have these
Thank
conversations.
goodness we can't analyze everything.
Oh, man.
Timeline. We have to get back to the timeline.
The next one on the timeline is 1876, which is the incandescent
Good
that
Lord.
Thomas Edison definitely didn't steal from somebody and definitely didn't patent. I was at a USPSA competition talking about the differences in light bulbs, even in today's world for automotive stuff. Because everything used to be incandescent bulbs. Oh, it was about aerospace too. This was a fun story. So every USPSA competition I go to now, I'm talking to, because a lot of them are old guys. They've been around a while. They know a lot of people. Been job hunting even at USPSA events. One of the guys was talking about he's an FAA coordinator and he's worked at a great number of airports. They said all the runway lights used to be incandescent bulbs, and they changed them to the halogen bulb, which wasn't near as good, and now everything's LED because LEDs tend to last longer and they're cheaper and they use less electricity. Yeah. But the problem with them, incandescent bulbs get warm in the winter. LEDs do not. Mm-hmm. So now they have to put heaters on all their LEDs to warm the lights to get the snow off of them. So in the winter they're less efficient than halogen and incandescent bulbs.
They can't just interchange them?
It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And they'd have to buy 2 different types of bulbs, keep 2 different types of bulbs, run different wattage. So in the winter they're less efficient, but in the summer they're more efficient, which for the most part tends to work out because all you gotta do is melt the snow once. You can turn the heater off. But
goodness. Yeah, there's so many things that
and ice
are so different. Yeah.
But no, growing up we always had old school incandescent bulbs in the house that, you know, they'd burn out, the coil would burn out, you'd have a nice little flicker or spark every once in a while, and you turn the lights on, pop, oh, there goes one.
There you go.
And
little
then,
wires broken inside.
And then I remember when I was about 15 or so, maybe a little younger, they had those fluorescent bulbs that were the coiled bulbs.
Yeah.
And they said those were more efficient and safer because they didn't put off heat, but it ended up they weren't more efficient, they're actually costing more. So then now everything's LEDs. That was about 2015 when LED light bulbs came out, I think. They were very expensive, especially the GE brand ones. But
Yeah.
now at Black Friday sales, you can get an LED bulb for $1.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most of mine are all changed, but the LEDs for reading are not really bright enough sometimes.
They're either not bright enough or they're retina burners. There's really no in between. Whereas with a nice halogen or an incandescent bulb, that warm light, that's a lot better, I think.
Well,
because LEDs, if you don't get the yellow ones or that bright blue light, it just burns your eyes out. I don't like them.
Well, I must do the other one then. Is it the coil one? I don't know a lot about them.
No, anything with a coil is just an incandescent bulb.
Oh.
LEDs is just it's a light emitting diode, so it doesn't like warm up like old light bulbs do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just on and off. So they run at different wattages sometimes, but typically it's one wattage.
It's very confusing when you're looking for bulbs.
It's confusing when you look at anything nowadays. I mean, there's so many options for everything.
Yeah. So many things to learn.
Because I remember talking to neighbor Bill. He said they had old handheld lanterns that they had to light.
Oh my God.
They didn't have They had electricity and light bulbs in most of their house, but like if they wanted to get up in the middle of the night, like they didn't have flashlights and they didn't want to turn the lights on, so they had one of those old school lamps that they had. Which obviously giant fire hazard, but
yeah, no doubt.
no one in today's world of helicopter parenting and safety would ever think of having one of those in their house. But
oh my gosh,
he said he had one, and he's got lights that he had converted from his old school fixturing into modern lights. So he's got that old housing of what used to be. Yeah, he has one in his house. Well, had, but. I imagine you had plenty of light bulbs in your house. You didn't have to worry about that growing up.
We didn't have any light problems. No. I suppose, well, power went out more often.
Like how often?
Storms and stuff.
How often do you think? Every time there's a storm?
No, and what we had was those, can't remember what you call them. Lightning rods?
Yeah, so it grounds the lightning when it hits your house.
Yeah, we had lightning rods.
Thanks, Ben Franklin. That's an invention from 1760. They're tired of Pennsylvania burning down every time there's a lightning storm.
Oh, my goodness. We had a fair amount because they kind of follow the river a lot of times, and we were close to the Mississippi. And the summers we had fair amount of thunderstorms.
It is a very strange life living between two rivers, because either the rain hits one river and stops, or it builds up from a river and you get dumped on, or a mixture of both. It's kind of weird living in the Midwest.
It is because it's a lot different. The Illinois River, well, I didn't ever know anything about it till I moved up here. But
so you were closer to the Mississippi growing up, weren't you?
7 miles.
Yep.
Yeah. 7 miles. Yeah. That was in Missouri, actually. We lived on the Illinois side. Hannibal was on the Missouri side. So, yeah.
What about flashlights? Did you guys have flashlights growing up?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What were batteries like growing up? Because nowadays, batteries you can buy at gas stations, general stores, pharmacies. They're everywhere. What were?
See, I don't know. I don't remember that because my dad took care of all that.
I say Dad probably did all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I mean, everything nowadays is shrink packaging, and it's all 5 different brands, store-bought brands. Whereas I can't imagine there's a whole lot of variety of that stuff back then.
Well, I don't know. We always had flashlights. That was never a problem. But of course, I don't remember back. See, I was born in 1935, so I don't remember a lot of that, things that were going on. I do remember when the Second World War was over. I remember Roosevelt on the radio.
Yeah. We're getting there. We'll
Yeah.
make it. We'll make it back to the radio. We'll get there. But that's one thing I was thinking about, just sitting thinking about this, is indoor lighting has a lot to do with education in the home, because if you don't have light when it's dark out, especially in the winter, it gets dark at what, 4:30? If you don't have light, kid can't learn. You got to do it right as they get home.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays with both parents working.
Oh,
If that was like that back then, the kid wouldn't learn at all. So I
well,
kind of
we didn't have a lot of homework back then either.
really.
No, we learned when we were in school. We didn't mess around and have music and art and all those other things.
All those useless
all those
subjects.
things that you don't really need.
Those were hobbies.
Pretty much, yeah. And piano lessons we had to do on our own on Saturdays. Any kind of music that we did was on our own.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, we just worked. We had recess, we had noon, and then
Came home and worked.
came home. Yeah. Yeah. And then we had chores to do before it got dark, and by then we were tired.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine.
we didn't have a lot of homework. No.
You guys get up early and help milk cows too?
No, I did not.
Didn't ever do that?
I didn't have to do that. No.
I'm sure your
No.
favorite chore was feeding chickens, right?
Yeah, the chicken thing, that, and we hauled in wood because we had a wood electric stove.
A
Talking
hybrid
about
stove.
Stoves. Yeah,
How does
one
that
half
work?
of it was a wood stove, and the other half was electric. And the electric part had the oven, as well as burners. But both of them had burners. The ones with the wood stove had a burner, or had a lid that you lifted up and you could see the wood, and there was a tray at the bottom. We had to carry out the ashes.
So what would you use the wood side for?
We used it to cook, or we used it when the power went off. We always had that. But I don't know how my mom ever controlled that wood cooked on that thing. Golly.
Gotta be really clever.
You have to be really good at it. Yeah, she was. She was very good at that.
I've never heard of a hybrid stove. That's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting piece of technology. But no, going back to lighting, I mean, again, something we take for granted. I mean, you shake your phone and you get light now. It's just, it's crazy. Getting up in the morning, turning a light on, getting your day started, taking a warm shower, without light, you can't see anything. So you got to either get a kerosene lamp or you have electricity lighting. Like I said, going out and doing chores, kind of hard to do when you can't see. There's a lot of really good farmers, I'm sure, back in the day that knew every foot of their land that they didn't need a light for.
I wish you could have talked to my dad. He could have told you all kind of stories.
I bet he could have.
Yeah.
And even especially on a farm, I mean, keeping predators away from your property. I mean, we have lights out here on our farm now that deters predators.
Yeah, and we lived around timber was on all sides of us, and a creek, so there was always coons and, well, in the wintertime they hunted coons, raccoons. The old hound dogs would be howling at night, and you could see the lights of the flashlights where they were treeing them.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Dad didn't hunt, but a lot of people around us did.
That's an interesting. I've never done it. I've had buddies growing up that did it.
That did it.
Just basically, like you said, take out a dog or just go out with your buddies, tree a coon, shine a flashlight on them, shoot them with a .22, get their pelts and sell them.
Well, see, Ferrari Fur and Wool here, they had a big business when we moved here. They sold a lot of, golly, a lot of wool, coons and
Coyotes.
I don't know what else.
Coons and coyotes are the two big ones.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Alaska right now, there's guys that make their entire livings on fur.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very old school still up there.
I'm surprised there's still any animals living anymore. People are not controlling.
Well, you say that and then you hit a deer on your drive home because they're still everywhere. No amount of blue tongue will get rid of all the deer.
Yeah.
So
We didn't have deer when I was growing up. There were not one deer in our area. Not one.
that's one thing that was very interesting talking to you, Bill, and a couple other people about. Even in the 70s, there weren't as many deer as there are now. Now there's deer everywhere.
Oh. Well, they need to control how many the hunters can get, you know. I mean, it's...
Well, they say the more they take, this works with coyotes too, the more they take, the more the deer breed. With coyotes, when they're yelping at the beginning of the night, they're actually doing roll call. So if they don't hear a specific pitch of a specific bark, the females actually go into heat.
Really?
Yep.
I'd never heard that.
And that's why the herd mentality is such an interesting study, because deer do the same thing. They have specific scents, specific calls, specific things that they know instinctively that if the herd is herding, there will be a lot more females going into heat once, even twice a year, instead of just the one season in November. Yep.
Well, I thought they only rutted. Rutting was only in one part of the year.
Yeah, it's only supposed to be around November time, but sometimes there's a second rut. And that's why when we started hunting more in the 70s and the 80s, that's why there's more deer population.
That's why we have more females.
Yep, because they actually started breeding more when we started hunting them. Yeah, that's kind of weird. And then you hear about animals going extinct, so it's a weird balance.
Yeah, well, the balance is gone.
Yep. So 1870, the light bulb. Next
Okay.
is 1886, which this is something I have researched extensively. The hippomobile. Jean-Joseph Etienne Lenoir invented the hippomobile. This is one of the research projects I did in high school. The first internal combustion engine was a coal powder mixture. It's coal dust. And they, much like an internal combustion engine that we use that uses octane-rated fossil fuels or ethanol, back then they'd take coal dust and bring it into an intake in what we know today, all the old school collectors call a hit and miss single cylinder. So every stroke we would expect in our cars today, it'd fire. Back then you'd get pop, 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 pop. So they called them hit and miss because sometimes it'd compress and ignite the coal mixture and sometimes it wouldn't. So instead of today where you get a nice solid hum of 6 cylinders, 4 cylinders, 8 cylinders.
So this was a car.
Yep, this was world's first automobile. It was designed and invented in Belgium by Jean-Joseph. 1886. Yeah, I did a lot of research, did a whole research project on it. Got a 99. I got 1% off on my write-up. I remember that project specifically. But yes, the automobile, 1886, and then I think in the 19-teens, the Model T came out, maybe the 1920s. And you have an interesting story about the Model T that I thought was really interesting.
Oh, my mom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When she was 15, she started driving a Model T Ford. As a young woman, women didn't do that much, but she loved it. And then when she and my dad got married, they took a Model T Ford. For their honeymoon, they went to Colorado, Denver, Colorado, and Dad said that on some of the roads, they only had stakes to mark the roads. They were more like mud.
Right.
Ruts, you know, but that's what they drove. So it was...
Which is a preposterous distance for a Model T Ford.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Yeah, he always drove Fords, even when they got more modern. He never drove anything but a Ford.
From where you grew up to Denver, it's 850 miles. So if you're going 20 miles an hour, which is the generous top speed for a Model T, so you would have to divide 850 divided by 20. If they drove straight, it'd take them 43 hours.
Well, let's see. He was born in 1904. 1924, 25, I suppose, is when they got married. I'm not sure. But there's so many things I wish I'd asked him.
The automobile was built from 1908 to 1927. So that's a long running.
Yeah.
1908 is pretty early for a Model T.
Yeah.
But yeah, the top speed, I think they had 2 or 3 gears in a Model T. The clutch was a little bit different. It wasn't like a sequential gearbox like we have today. You would push in the clutch to select forward or reverse, and then you would release the clutch. And then if you wanted second gear, you actually had to hold the clutch down. So if you wanted high gear, you had your left and your right foot pushing down on something. And those clutches were not light. So I imagine if you wanted a highway trip on a Model T, your left foot would be burning.
Oh my gosh.
And they were
when
only
was the last year they made them?
27.
So see, they would be right underneath that with probably one of the more modern
They probably had one from the teens or the early 20s.
model. Probably. Yeah, interesting.
I want to know what the engine size was on them, because it couldn't have been more than like 8 horsepower. Oh, wow. There's a 2.9 liter engine. I figured it'd be smaller than that. 2.9 liters with a whopping horsepower, max horsepower of 20. It does say at the later engines and gearboxes in the 20s, they were able to go up to 45 miles an hour, but
Well, see.
I imagine the earlier ones probably did half that.
So that'd be about, and they went in October, so it wouldn't exactly be warm, probably,
Which is probably better, because those engines were renowned for overheating.
by that time, yeah.
In the summer, you definitely, especially our 100-some degree summers, you would not want to be driving a Model T up a hill. Because I remember reading somewhere in either Montana or somewhere with the Rockies that at the tops of because obviously it's not one straight hill at the top of the mountain. But on many of the tops of these plateaus, they would have big rain barrels so that you could pop your hood and just douse your engine with water because they couldn't cool fast enough. Because going up a hill, you're going full throttle on one of those, and you're running at the highest RPM the car can, so you had to cool off your car.
Can you imagine Pikes Peak?
Oh, that'd be crazy. You have to stop every mile. But yeah, I remember as a courtesy, either locals or the local government would put out rain barrels for people so that they could, which in the old days horses would use them, but in the later years in the 1900s they would use them for cars because they'd overheat going uphill. Crazy stuff.
A lot of stuff. A lot of hard work.
What was
a lot of planning.
What was your first vehicle? Is it something you drove on the farm?
But I drove my dad's. Well, actually, I was 15 when I was able to drive a car, a sedan. But I drove my dad's truck. He had a GMC truck that I drove before that.
4-speed or a 3-speed?
There was 4 on the floor.
See, a lot of people don't know the difference between 3 on the tree and 4 on the floor. You think you can explain that to people?
Yeah. Well, you had to use the clutch. I mean, we didn't have any automatic.
Right. So 3 on the tree, whereas a lot of people don't know the difference between column shift and console shift because
Really?
a lot of people just drive cars their whole life. They don't drive trucks. Whereas most trucks have a column shifter, so for you folks who don't know, there'll be a picture.
I didn't ever have a car of my own. I mean, I went through 4 years of college and never had a car of my own until we got married.
Huh. So
I rode the bus to college.
Did you?
Yep. Took
So
the bus.
with a column shifter, your steering wheel is on what we call a steering column, and on that column there's a gear shifter that uses linkages to get down to your transmission.
Yeah.
Before we had automatic transmissions, we would actually have 3 gears on the column, and then the 4th gear was reverse, and then neutral was right in between them all. And the console being the middle of your front seat and your passenger seat. Again, nowadays most people are used to a selector where you have 1, 2, and 3, drive, overdrive, whatever.
Yeah.
It used to be 4 on the floor or 3 on the tree, which nowadays there's some cars that have 6 speeds that are still manual, but manual transmission is almost dead here in 2020. the last time I heard of a car being built that wasn't a performance vehicle with a 6-speed manual gearbox was the Chevy Cruze. Those cars were pretty popular 2014, 2015. But other than that, I don't really know of many modern manual transmissions. I mean, my first car was manual transmission. It was a 2001 Cavalier, and I loved that thing.
Yeah.
That was a 5-speed manual transmission. Actually did videos.
It's fun to shift.
I did videos on replacing the clutch in that. That was one of my most popular videos. Got like 20,000 views. That's the beauty of YouTube, is how-to videos and learning. But yeah, it's fun to shift. It's something to do.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, your dad used to. He used to ride with me. We hauled gravel in the old truck, and it had, I don't know how many gears, probably 5 or 6.
Was it the
It was
GMC?
It was the green goose, or the yellow goose, we called it.
The yellow goose.
But that was all. You had to downshift on the hills, or if you had a load, and, But
Was it just a half-ton pickup, like what?
No. It was bigger than
Big
that.
grain
It was
truck?
A stock truck. Yeah. I don't remember what it was called.
Is it like the red one that Dad has now? That
Yeah, pretty much.
Big grain truck. So okay,
Yeah.
so it's like a 2-ton grain truck.
You could put racks on it, and we used to haul the
Yep.
animals to the fair in it until we got a trailer.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That must have been a big ramp to get them up there.
It was.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, that's the one that he has is a 1972 2-ton grain truck with a dump on it. So he's got a hydraulic dump that he can use a power tap off from the engine to
yeah.
raise the dump up. But those usually have the 7-liter GMC engines in them, and they have, his has a high and low differential. So you got gears in the rear differential as well as 5 or 6 gears.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, granny gear was the low diff on one. You basically could get 2 miles an hour out of that.
Granny, yeah.
You're just trying to get out of the mud, essentially.
Get down on there, all the way down.
And then you'd get out on the pavement, put it in high diff, and then you'd start driving on pavement. But, I mean, did you even grow up on a tar and chip road? Did you have gravel or did you have dirt?
Well, here we had the highway, but at home everything was gravel.
Gravel, yeah.
Yeah.
Because now, when I drive to these competitions, the only gravel road you get is the one going into the rod and gun club that you're going to.
Yeah.
Everything's tar and chip, and every interstate's either concrete or asphalt.
Now, down in Adams County, there's still gravel roads, and they use all that limestone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is the dirtiest,
Dirty,
road.
dusty,
Oh.
grimy. If your car has a bit of moisture on it, it's getting on there.
Yeah, and then you get these little chips in your tires.
Oh, actually getting embedded in.
You can,
Yep.
yeah. If you get a big enough one that it'll stick.
It's really fun when you go from those gravel roads to the pavement and you hear the rubber boing, 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 boing with all the rocks releasing.
Well, out in Iowa where Bruce lived, there was a lot of gravel roads. Oh, they were dirty, dusty roads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, with me, I've never owned a truck. They're just too expensive for me. I don't have a job to justify owning a truck. Driving that little Grand Am on gravel roads, that's an interesting experience. And especially, like I said, going to Kentucky when the 2 lanes are about this wide. Thankfully, the locals, they all have trucks, so they move over. I'm like, hey, thanks, man. Otherwise, I'd be in the ditch dead over there. Because at the Rod and Gun Club, it's a 1 lane.
Oh, my, really?
It was 1 lane, and where we are, it's flatter than flat. There, it's windy, it's hilly, and if you're coming around a curve and there's a truck coming, whoo, you can get smoked real quick. So yeah, it's just
They didn't spend a lot of money on the roads, that's
No.
for sure.
It's a very, very interesting world going there. But yeah, I mean, today we're pampered with asphalt, concrete roads everywhere we go.
That was the best thing that ever happened when we moved here. It was the Blacktop Road, because when we lived north of Middle Grove, it was all gravel and mud. We never had a clean car.
No.
You could wash the car in town, or you could wash it at home, but you still had to get to town or back from town.
Yep.
It just didn't work.
Nope. No, that's a very interesting
You still
ordeal.
see cars in the parking lots where they've got a lot of dust and dirt on the back.
And most gravel roads nowadays is white rock too, so it's not like you said, limestone. It's not like the nasty dirt roads that used to be a thing.
The township roads mostly that still have. I call them dirt roads.
So what was your first vehicle once you got out of college?
Well, I never had one until my own until I drove Ed's car. He had a car. But as far as having my own car, I didn't have one until, oh golly, how long was it? I had a little green station wagon. It'd be in the 80s.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I didn't ever.
Arguably the worst.
Never owned a car.
Arguably the worst decade for cars. Trying to integrate electricity and electronic fuel injection into a car.
This was a brand new Buick. Little station
A Buford.
wagon.
A Buford station wagon.
I think it was called a Century. And we drove out to New Jersey to pick up Karen because they were moving to Michigan. So Bruce and I drove out there to pick up the kids and help move. And we got off the interstate just in time. Luckily, there was a dealership right at the intersection, and the car died. Brand new car.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we had to get a loaner to get out to Steve's, out to New Jersey, and then come back and pick up the car when it was ready.
Interesting.
I don't remember what the problem was.
It was probably electrical. If it was in the 80s, I would almost guarantee it was an electrical issue.
Probably was.
'Cause, I mean, even nowadays,
We were lucky to get off the interstate.
I'm fortunate. I've never had a car with electrical issues. All the issues I've ever had were with transmissions and engines. But the 80s, when they tried to integrate electronic fuel injection, woo! I mean, all the luxury cars, they started having like heated seats and all that goofy stuff in the 80s, and just adding all those electrical components that had never been proven out. I mean, there were electrical fires in a lot of cars. So that was fun.
I don't think I'd ever want to have a brand new car. There's too many things.
Oh, it's too much unnecessary stuff.
Oh my goodness.
I've never had a car newer than 2001, and I love it. Because the Cavalier, it didn't have power locks, it didn't have power windows.
Oh,
it had air conditioning, which was nice, and it had analog brakes, which is nice. And I think as far as that goes, that was really it as far as the luxury items. I don't even think that had a CD player. I think it had a tape deck. It didn't have a CD player. The Grand Am I drive now has a CD player, which I don't. Obviously, today I've got my cell phone. I listen to podcasts, but Cavalier it had a tape deck. It didn't have power locks or windows. It had a manual transmission, whereas the '01 Grand Am GT that I drive has a sunroof, which I never use.
That's pretty.
Automatic windows, which I almost never use. Automatic locks.
Ooh. What year is
an alarm system.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. 2001.
Oh.
Leather interior.
Oh.
And analog brakes. So.
Yeah, I've driven, my friend has a 2019. If she just moves over too far to the line, it beeps. If she goes too far this way, it beeps.
I also have lumbar support. I forgot about
No.
that. It's broken. It doesn't work.
Too much.
You have satellite navigation built in your car. You have Bluetooth. You have
Bluetooth.
Some cars you can charge your phone by just placing your phone in the console. Heated seats, climate control where it's temperature based. Moon roofs now are kind of neat.
Oh, the windshield wipers drive me crazy because you can control them, but otherwise they're automatic.
Oh, goodness,
and
no.
they only go on when there's so much rain.
Oh, that's terrible. The other thing that really ticks me off is in newer cars, they have the radar detection for when there's vehicles in front of you. So if you have your cruise control set, it senses the distance between the next car and it slows you down. And it automatically slows the car down for you, which I hate.
That I like to control what my...
Yeah. And then there's the Teslas that drive themselves now. That's weird.
That's scary.
My buddy has a Subaru that drives itself. If you're on the interstate and the cruise is set, it'll keep it between the lines for you. Yeah.
Does it park too?
Yes. Automatic parallel parking.
Have you ever seen that done?
Yep.
Does it really work?
Yeah, it's weird.
Oh my God.
It's very strange. What else do they have in them now?
Yeah, let's.
Oh, the cars they shut off their engine at lights. I forgot about that. You ever heard about that? The engine shuts off when you're stopped at a light. You hit the gas, it starts up again.
Nope, haven't seen that one.
It's supposed to be a fuel savings, but
Oh, please.
if your car isn't off for a minute, the startup ignition wastes more fuel than it would for saving it.
Well, and it's the automatic starter. The key thing is.
Well, your starter will burn out faster too because you're using it more.
Yeah.
Because it's a servo motor, so it's. I imagine nowadays they're probably brushless motors, which 90% of the people watching this don't know the difference between brushless and brush motors. But like all your old school technology for like handheld drills, every once in a while you have to replace the brushes in them. Same with your old blenders and stuff, because those old blenders would last forever. You could put rocks you could put rocks in those things and they'd still run. But that little black dust that comes out of your hand drill or whatever that has an electric servo motor in it, that's the brushes burning up because that's what makes contact. Which nowadays, like I said, there's a lot of brushless motors. But yeah, it's just technology in cars is not something I'd like to sign on to. Basically, everything made before 2005, that's probably what I'll be driving for the next 10 years.
Mine's an '09, and it's 100. I got 111,000 on it now. It's still running great. I just have to get new tires here pretty soon before winter.
Yep.
But it's fine. I don't need all that stuff. I don't like things blinking at me all the time.
Well, working in a car dealership, the funniest thing, I don't know how far back the check engine light goes. I'm sure they had them in the 80s. But people will put a sticky note over their check engine light. I'm like, you can still see the sticky note, so you still know your check engine light's there. I don't know what you're covering up. You still know cognitively that it's on. And then at night, I'm sure that light shines right through that sticky note. People are so dumb. But yeah, that's working at a car dealership. You learn a lot.
Yeah, you learn a lot there. That's for sure. Yeah.
So other than your Buford dying, do you have any fun car stories?
I don't know what more they can do besides the automatically driving them. I can't imagine what they'll come up with next. Aeronomics, I suppose they'll probably be.
A flying car would be neat. Oh. Wouldn't mind a flying car.
I don't want to get that high in the air. Yeah. We had TV, black and white, in 50, it was either 53 or 54.
You're jumping a little far ahead on that one.
I know.
Where is
What's the next timeline?
The next one is the sewing machine in 1889.
1889.
That's the foot pedal Singer.
Oh yeah, Singer had a good machine. I'll tell you, they ran beautifully. My mom used one for a long time.
That's definitely a lost art.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of people have a sewing machine, much less use it. I've used them. I've used sewing machines before. We used to knit all the time. That used to be something we did.
Yeah.
Latch hook even. That's the simplest form of doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, sewing machines are an interesting ordeal because for sewing machines you had to go to a tailor. You had to go get literally something tailor-made, which is now a gimmick or a luxury item in today's world.
It is now.
All of our stuff comes from Indonesia, Taiwan, Thailand.
Or unless you are an odd shape and you can't, then you have to have it altered.
Right. But
I don't know if they even do that anymore. Where would you go to to buy a suit and get it altered?
I have no idea. I've never done it.
It has to be a men's clothing store somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure like Men's Warehouse might have something. But yeah, I've never.
Is there a J. Jones or something in the Grand Prairie?
I don't know.
think there is a men's store there.
But yeah, before that, before you had someone that you knew had a sewing machine or you had one, you'd have to go get stuff tailor-made. I mean, thinking about getting your shoes made, shoes weren't what they are now. They weren't mass-produced.
Did you ever try to find a shoe repair store?
That's That's an interesting ordeal. Well, I mean, with shoes being as inexpensive they are now,
Oh my gosh.
back compared to the 1800s, you had one pair of shoes and you wore them forever. And if they busted the sole out, you went to the cobbler and he nailed them back on.
We used to, yeah, Ed used to have his shoes resoles on like boots and work shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Dad did too. They'd put a new sole on it.
That's something that definitely
Yeah.
isn't a thing anymore.
Yeah, they did.
Because I go through a pair of shoes every year. And then, of course, the work boots. Back when I had a job,
Yeah.
I'd get a pair of steel toes every year.
Yeah.
Because a pair of steel toed work boots are only about $100 nowadays.
Oh, I bet they're costly now.
Now, $100 is nothing for a pair of work boots.
Yeah.
So I imagine it'd probably cost a lot in the 1800s to buy a brand new pair of boots.
But see, the quality of the workmanship and the quality of the leather was much better.
Well, that and people actually oiled their boots. You know, they had to take care of their stuff. So that'd be a little bit different too.
Well, you polished your shoes. Did you ever polish shoes?
I polished my boots with oil just to keep
Oil.
them from, which when I worked in a transmission facility, that wasn't hard. You just walk down one of the lines and you get
Oh.
oil on them.
Yeah.
But no, I'd oil them just so that they didn't crack. Because unfortunately, a lot of them are pleather now. Even when they say genuine leather, they're not genuine leather. A lot of them have polymer finishes on the top.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the sewing machine. Now the sewing machines are amazing technology. What they do now, it's just.
Because originally, with the original Singers, there's a little rocker arm that you put your foot on. You'd rock it back and forth. It would run an arm straight up to the drive wheel of the Singer.
There was a wheel with a belt, wasn't there?
It was either arm. I think it was just a rocker arm because if you
Can't.
do
The pedal went this way.
if you
yeah.
do the pedal like this, you can't continually move a serpentine belt
Okay,
like
well,
that.
maybe it
So it'd
was.
have an arm that was offset so that when the arm went up, it was attached to a wheel. So when the arm went up, the wheel went up and it'd pivot, and when the arm went down, it'd pull the wheel backwards. So that's how it worked.
Yeah.
And then they did have variable speed eventually, where you could actually change the gear train in those Singers, so you could run at different speeds for what your foot input was, but you still had to match your foot input to what you were feeding. So it was kind of an art.
It was, and it didn't go backwards either. Like
Right, because the ones nowadays you have
you go straight ahead or you turned it around.
you have a foot pedal with a potentiometer in it, so the further you push the foot pedal, the faster it goes, and then you do have a reverse.
Oh yeah.
And then on top of that, you can choose different speeds of.
Oh my goodness.
of the sewing
now
machine
you
on top of that.
embroidery and do all kinds of stuff on them. Yeah. Yeah. But
That just makes me think. I bet there's people out there that have never sewed on a button.
oh my.
The easiest form of sewing. These two holes, those two holes, these two holes. Or, I mean, if you're lazy, you just do the same two holes and the same two holes.
Well, people just throw away clothes when they lose a button or
Yep.
the seam isn't working right.
Well, I imagine there's probably shirt manufacturers now that don't sew an extra button on the bottom of them. It used to be, years ago, every shirt came with a second or an extra button sewn on them.
Some of my blouses still have, well, they have little envelopes of extra
That too.
buttons.
Mhm.
Yeah. On the women's clothes, some of them.
Yep.
Yeah. I got a whole box of buttons.
Oh, you've got cookie tins full of buttons.
By God, you had to replace those buttons because you weren't going to throw anything away.
Absolutely not. The sewing machine. I wonder what else you could use a sewing. Well, I mean, you probably do your window drapes, well, couldn't you? Sewing those, making your own drapes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just thinking all the different things you could probably use it for.
Yeah.
Putting the eyelets on them so you can put them on a curtain rod.
Yeah, I was trying to think.
How'd you make doilies?
Crochet.
Crochet hook them?
Yeah. I have a bedspread that my grandmother made for me, and it's all crocheted.
Really?
Yeah. She did that for each one of her grandchildren. She only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. But she made each one of them.
Not 14 like you do?
Yeah.
How many of us are there?
There's 15 grandchildren.
And 5 great?
9 and 6. 6 girls, 9 boys. And then 5, 6 great.
6 great, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, but that's, she and my aunt never married, and she lived with my grandparents, my mother's family, and that's what they did, was crochet.
It's a very time-consuming process, that's
Oh,
for sure.
my goodness. Yeah, beautiful work. I mean, it's just, now nobody does big pieces. We used to make wool comforters. You were talking about, the feather beds, but we would buy wool from Amana Woolen Mills or up at Pendleton, Oregon, and it'd come in big bats, and then we'd put a cloth on the bottom and the top, and then tack them to make comforts. And talk about wool, it was warm, lightweight. Nothing like the ones they make now, or cotton batting.
Well, every time I got wool socks, there's nothing warmer than wool sock, but they were itchy. Was that the same thing?
It's that kind of wool.
Is it itchy when you make a blanket out of it?
It's carded wool. I mean, it's about this thick.
About a ½ inch or so?
Not even a ½ inch. But it was so much warmer, and it was lightweight. You didn't need 3 quilts on top of it, But the last one I made was for Mark and Lisa when they got married. I haven't made another one since.
That's an interesting animal. If you don't shear modern sheep, since we bred them to produce, if you didn't shear them, they would die from just carrying all that wool.
Yeah.
Because I remember somewhere in Scotland they found a sheep that they lost a year previous, and the sheep had doubled its weight in wool. So it could barely move. That's an interesting genetic species there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what they do with sheep's wool now. I suppose they probably felted. I don't know if they used it. I don't know what they use it for.
Well, let's consult DuckDuckGo and see what it tells us. 10 uses for wool besides spinning it.
We had a few sheep, but not very many. I bottle fed 2 of them because they lost their mamas. That was fun.
Mulch. Mulch. Using sheep wool for mulch.
You're kidding.
That's what it says right here. There are lots of companies that specialize in making wool pads designed to mulch your garden. However, you don't need to buy expensive pads in order to benefit from the powers of wool. Go away. Instead, wrap wool around the trunks of your large plants or trees. Since it has such great insulating properties, it can prevent weeds.
Never.
Learn something every day. Insulation. There are several Amish families in my community who use wool as insulation. Although most modern homes don't utilize wool anymore, wool insulation was incredibly popular for synthetic materials, i.e. fiberglass. Furniture. Wool is often used in carpeting, but since it also used as upholstery. In fact, many companies in public transportation and aircraft sector use wool for their seat upholsteries.
Oh, well.
Fertilizer. I never would have thought of that. Fertilizer is one of the great uses for wool you may not have known of. It takes a while to break down, but when you toss wool into compost pile, it adds beneficial nutrients, including calcium and sodium.
I think we need to ask some sheep breeders what they do with their wool. I can't imagine.
Skincare. The sheer...
Woolite? Just washes wool.
Lanolin oil. Lanolin oil from sheep wool is for
Well,
skincare.
they use it for yarn, wool yarn.
Well, that's, they said these are all the alternatives to spinning it and using it for yarn. Brick reinforcement. Interesting. There's still research being done on this, but developers have found a way to use a combination of seaweed and wool to make bricks. Composite materials. Cleaning material. Leave some wool on hand for accidental spills and messes. You already know how to absorb. You already know how absorbent wool is. Makes wool highly effective at cleaning up even tough messes, like oil spills.
Huh.
Packing material. Insulation for firefighting. Oh, this is a good word. Hügelkutter.
German?
It's a method of gardening in which you build a raised garden literally from the ground up. You'll add all kinds of waste materials, in quotations, including logs, branches, food scraps, manure, grass, clippings, typically everything you would normally put into a compost pile to heap up before covering it in soil. The waste inside the heap decomposes and releases nutrients, making a fertile raised garden mound meet compost pile meets, well, awesome. This is definitely a woman writing this article. Uses for wool include throwing it into your Hügelkultur construction. It's just another fertilizer use. They're just using it in this goofy word.
Goodness sakes. Well, that's an interesting little tidbit.
Hügelkultur. It's a German word for that goofy gardener. So yeah, there's a lot of uses for wool. Carpeting is the only thing I could think of, because when you look at shag carpeting, you think of wool, even though a lot of it's synthetic.
Wool carpeting is harder to remove stains. That's where fires in homes are bad, because they use so many synthetics for carpets, and drapes, and bedding and all that. It just goes up fast.
The next one is at the turn of the century, the electric washing machine. 1904.
Was it a wringer?
Yeah,
Wringer washer?
one of the wringer rollers. Yep.
Yeah.
Basically a big old tub with an agitator and a wringer on the top.
Mm-hmm. And you'd pop buttons when you ran the shirts through the wringer, because it was tight. If you didn't put something on the top or the bottom of the buttons and didn't feed it just right, they'd pop right out at you.
I don't think I would want to put my button-down shirts through a wringer.
Oh my goodness.
That doesn't sound like a good time.
Yeah, yeah. We used to do laundry outside. We had a covered porch, and that's where the wringer washer stayed in the summertime.
Mm.
But then we took it in the basement in the winter. But it was a wringer washer. Yeah, that was interesting, learning how to do that.
So we already talked about the soap you guys used to make. Before that, I mean, you watch spaghetti westerns and you see all the women doing laundry in the river.
Oh my.
I imagine they used some sort of lard lime mixture as soap to do that. And then they had the scrub boards. What were those called?
Goodness.
What did they call those?
I don't know. We didn't ever have to do that.
That sounds like
we had a wringer washer as long as I could remember.
That sounds like a horrible ordeal.
Oh my goodness. That was so hard. Yeah, that's when women died young.
And
childbirth.
all of them had arthritis.
Yeah.
By the age of 30.
Yeah. Hard work and childbirth, that just about did us in.
Yeah, they just call it a washboard.
Mm. Never had to do that.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun.
It wasn't fun, I'm sure.
Because nowadays, doing laundry, even your washer and dryer have Bluetooth, and it can tell your phone when it's done. And you got stuff like, I mean, you guys air dried all your clothes, I imagine, right?
Yeah, we either did them on the line or in the basement in the winter.
Yep.
Yeah, we didn't have dryers then.
Nowadays, you can have a dryer that has wrinkle guards, so it'll keep tumbling your clothes so they'll get wrinkles in them.
Oh, and if not, you have this super duper liquid that you put in there, and you take these clothes out, and there's wrinkle free.
Yep. So, I mean, the process back then, you would do what? Fill the agitator with water, right?
Hot water and soap, and it would agitate. Then you'd put it through the wringer, and then it'd go into 2 rinse tubs. You'd rinse it twice, but you rinsed it by hand.
I would say you had to do that by hand.
You did this by hand. and then you'd run it through the wringer again.
Did you ever have to clean the agitator tub? Because I imagine there's probably buildup.
Oh yeah, especially farm clothes.
Right.
Dirty clothes. And you did the whites first, then you did the coloreds, and then you did the jeans and the work clothes.
Yep.
Third. But it was the same water.
Really?
Never changed the water.
Right.
Mm-mm.
But once you're done, there's just a drain plug on the bottom to let the water out?
Mm-hmm. There's a hose.
Yeah.
Drain. Yeah. Yep. The grass was always good around the side there because all the water was drained.
I imagine so. Yeah. That's pretty funny. So yeah, nowadays, it's just, everything's front loading too. You got front load washer and dryer. You just take your magic little wash pod, or you have a little drawer that you fill with laundry detergent and hit a button and wait.
And softener.
Fabric softeners, you got dryer sheets to keep the static out of your clothes. So you can actually do that. Did you guys ever add stuff to your clothes to either starch them or unstarch them?
You starched them. Let me think. How did we starch?
Because I know starching your jeans used to be
Yeah,
popular.
we had a separate basin. If there was anything like collars that needed to be starched, like men's clothes, shirts, or things like that. We didn't do a lot of starching. We didn't have the spray starch can.
That was kind of big in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah. Then when we ironed, you take the dry clothes and you'd sprinkle them. We had water in a bottle,
Mm.
and you'd sprinkle water on them, and you'd roll them up, and you'd put them in a basket, and then you would take them out one at a time when you were ready to iron, and the moisture would then help you with the wrinkles.
What would you use for an iron?
We had electric irons.
Didn't have to wait for the iron to heat up over the
No,
fire?
no, we didn't have any of that. No, we had electric irons.
Because I know we
We
still
didn't
have...
have steam irons, but we had electric irons.
Yeah, we still have that cast iron that we use as a doorstop, don't we? Yeah,
Mhm.
that's an old school
I
iron.
got a couple of those in there.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them.
Yeah.
It's a really good thing to hit your toe on really early in the morning.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah, it's a good wake-up call.
Yeah.
I can't say I've ever ironed my clothes. All my clothes have so much polyester in them, they don't need ironed.
Only thing you have to press now, and with the steam iron it's not hard, is cotton clothes.
Mm.
And there still are cotton clothes around.
I've grown up in the poly world. I wear those poly arm guards when I'm outside. They help wick heat, and I'm not good in the sun, so they keep the heat of the sun off of me. All my button downs are like 60% poly, so they hardly ever wrinkle unless you just let them sit in the dryer all day.
Well, yeah, if you don't get them out of the dryer when they're ready. But
Basically, everything I wear has poly in them. All my pants have poly in them, so they flex. Because being my size, being all lanky, I've jeans. I don't even wear jeans anymore because I just used to tear them up. Knees, the inseams, they just, whenever I'd bend, they just tear.
they give.
Because I just have a range of motion that isn't typical of most people. So when you squat over wearing a pair of jeans, they just rip. They can't flex with me because I got a much larger range of motion than most people, being 6'4". So that's why I started wearing these, because they actually flex.
Well,
But yeah, everything's got polymer in them now.
yeah. And I notice now the women's jeans, you don't want to buy them when they fit perfect, because after you wear them a day, they stretch.
Yep.
So that's hard to buy.
Whereas with the cotton clothing, it'd do the opposite. It would shrink.
Yeah.
So I grew up, my mother would always give me the mentality of, oh, you need to buy clothes that are a little bit too large for you because they shrink. Not today. They're
Bigger
usually
and
only about
bigger.
30% cotton anymore.
Yeah. There are still women's clothes that are all cotton. I made the mistake of buying at a discount store up in Wisconsin. I bought some blouses that were all cotton, and I wasn't smart enough to read the labels like I should have. So I have to press the collars. But if you hang them up, they're not too bad. But I don't mind ironing. But because we ironed everything before,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, it didn't look like it after you wore it a day, but you did it anyway.
Yeah, I find that once you iron something, it's good for about 3 hours.
Yeah.
After that, it's not worth anything.
No, it's just wrinkles. Yeah. So the electric irons, washers and no dryers and electric irons, no steam irons.
And certainly no dishwashers.
Oh my gosh.
I don't like dishwashers. I've never lived in a family, so I can see where it works for a family. I've been alone for as long as I've been an adult, last 8 years of my life. So I dirty a dish, I wash it immediately, and I put it back.
Yeah, either that or I soak it. The only time I use my dishwasher, of course, we don't have like family gatherings now, but
Thanks, coronavirus. And by thanks, coronavirus, I mean the governments. But anyway.
yeah. I use mine if I'm baking and I have a lot of pans and things, then I'll use the
Pans and mixing bowls and
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
Yep, that kind of thing. It's handy. But as far as I'd have to store up 5 days of food, of dishes.
At least.
Be mostly glasses, silverware.
Yeah, it's silverware mostly. All right, so recapping, we have the kitchen range in 1800, we have electric power in 1830, indoor plumbing in 1850, the incandescent light bulb in 1870, the automobile in the mid-1880s, sewing machine in 1890, and the washing machine at the turn of the century. There's a lot more technology, obviously, that was going on between there.
Yeah.
The telegraph came around in the 1850s. I'm sure you didn't experience any of that.
Nope.
The telephone was...
We talked about the phone.
I'm surprised that wasn't in here. When was the telephone invented? The 1880s? Figure that out here in about 10 seconds.
Alexander Graham Bell.
Which, that's another one. He stole the idea
Did
from
he?
somebody. Oh, yeah.
There's no original.
There's no such thing as an original idea. I mean, there's a electrical transducer with a diaphragm in it, I think, is the only thing that I remember from the invention of the telephone. The invention of the telephone was cumulative work done by many individuals and led to an array of lawsuits relating to the patent claims. This is the first sentence in the wiki article. Several individual and numerous companies. We have Meucci's telephone, we have Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, and we have master telephone patent that happened in 1876 to Alexander Graham Bell. The concept of the telephone dates back to the string telephone or lover's telephone that has been known for centuries, comprising of diaphragms. So yeah, that was 1876, and yeah, that party line that's an interesting concept. That's a very interesting concept.
It definitely was.
Is there any other?
And there was a switchboard. You know, there was a phone office and a switchboard.
I can't imagine there's really much else that happened in the 1800s, and as far as technology goes. Tractors would be one I would talk about for farming, but that's not really something in the household, because that was...
No, it wouldn't be anything I would
That was
know enough
Caterpillar in the late 1800s, early 1900s with their steam-powered tractors. That was one really interesting read about World War I, if anyone's interested in, is how the Caterpillar tractor contributed to the World War I war efforts, because before the Caterpillar tractor, it was all horse-driven stuff. And even into World War II, the Germans still used draft horses to move a lot of stuff. They didn't have a whole lot of automobiles.
Ed's brother built roads. He drove a Caterpillar, and he built roads during World War II. Yeah.
I can't think of any other inventions that are really noteworthy from the 1800s. Because next time we talk, we're going to get into the more technology, and we get towards the radio and stuff. That'll be fun.
Well, you'll be talking because I don't know enough about the technology.
I think you'll be surprised how much you're going to talk about radio and television and the advancements that happened in the mid-1900s. But yeah, once we get towards the computer stuff, it's going to get weird. It's going to be an interesting talk.
Find somebody else for that one.
No, I think that this has been an interesting start, because we've got a whole nother discussion to talk about what people consider technology today. But there's a lot of stuff that we take for granted every day, and I think it's fun to talk about this stuff.
Well,
I mean,
and
just
we
the
don't
simple stuff.
understand how much work goes into all this
Mm-hmm.
before it becomes a product. I mean, it's just...
Can you imagine having, I mean, those chairs that I wanted that guy to build? Can you imagine if someone had to build a chair in the modern day? It wouldn't even stay up a day.
It would not. No.
And just looking at the different types of upholstery, people wouldn't know how to upholster. Leather versus cloth versus poly. Wood staining and poly coating so it lasts. I mean, the dowels that it takes to make a table or a chair, you have to turn that on a wood lathe. I mean, you can make it by hand, but it'd suck.
Oh, my goodness.
With a chisel and sanding for hours and hours.
Hours and
Making
hours.
a carpet would be next to impossible. You have to have wood floors everywhere. The electricity is a huge thing everyone takes for granted, just charging your cell phone every day, just thinking about all the things that go into that. I think that's why I like these discussions, because naturally I'm a historian. I love history. It was something I wanted to do before I realized it didn't make any money. That's why I went to engineering, because I could be living history, I guess. But it's an interesting thing to think about, because all the different materials and the craftsmanship and the things that we just don't appreciate in the modern world, because we all just get up and stare at our phones all the time. You know, there's not a whole lot
Well,
of...
young people don't know where the products came from. I mean, they don't even know a lot. I mean, maybe in the Midwest, but they don't know a lot about where food comes from.
Well, even when I was a kid, there were kids that lived in the city that don't know where food
They
comes
didn't
from.
know.
I can't imagine today. It's only gotten worse, I think.
Well, yeah,
There's probably not a
obviously.
whole lot of people that realize beef comes from a cow. And they
Or
probably
the
never...
work that goes into producing
Yeah.
whatever product it is
Mhm.
for food is, I don't know. No.
Well, Gigi, I
Yeah.
think we're going to have to wrap this one up, because this is going to be a pretty long podcast.
Yeah, it kind of did get a little long.
We went through a century worth of technology, and we left a lot out.
Yeah. A lot I didn't know about.
All right, well, stay tuned for the next one. I think it'll be a little more interesting, or maybe just the same, but it's going to be...
Well, I hope somebody listens.
Oh, we'll get some listeners, I imagine. The last one's got about 100, I think. So it'll be fun. That, and like I said, it's good to talk about this stuff. I think it's fun. So thanks for listening, guys. Stay tuned for the next one. Bye.